Scott Allan, thank you so much for coming in to join me on the Transform Your Future podcast. I've been looking forward to this. We've been messaging back and forth. How are you doing today? Thank you so much.
I'm doing great, and thanks for having me on the show. It's great to be here.
Yes, let's kind of jump right in because, just as a little bit of a frame here, I'm very excited to talk to you because number one, we're going to talk about personal growth. We're going to talk about Kaizen and, continuous improvement. And we're going to talk about your journey as an author speaker, which I'm very interested in since I'm working on a book and I want to get it out there in the world. So let's jump right in and talk about your book. Doing the hard things first.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, I published there's 4 books in that series now, but I published the first book in 2021, just coming out of a very rough year in 2020. As you know, it was COVID, so it was probably rough for everybody. But coming out of that year, I think by that time I already published maybe 15 or 20 books, and I was really winding down, and it was I don't want to say that I was giving up on my business, but I was pretty close to giving up on my business. I hadn't published anything in 2020. In fact, I probably unpublished more books than I published. Coming out of that, I had this, I think it was an idea, but I'd been listening to some podcasts and interviews and reading some books on the topic of procrastination. And the reason is because it was one of the things that I've always struggled with, and I was really struggling with it at the time when I put this book together. So it was, in a sense, the book was, yes, to help a lot of other people with that problem. It was also designed to help myself and get myself out of a really bad rut. So I put together a little system for it that I think was easy to follow. It had quite a few steps, probably had one too many lists than it needed, but I think I launched the second edition of it maybe, I think it was this year, actually, earlier this year. But the first edition was, it was a good book. But I think people really gravitated towards the concept of, doing the hard things first. And of course, it's compared a lot to the, Brian Tracy calls it eating the frog, and somebody else calls it something else, right? But the idea behind it, though, isn't the first book is around like how to overcome procrastination, yes. But the real purpose behind it is to build trust with yourself, because what was happening is, when you procrastinate the way that I do or the way that I did,
yes,
and you do that enough, over the weeks, months, and years, and it becomes for me, it became such an ingrained habit that I wasn't really thinking about it. Just if I had a bill to pay, I'd put it off. And I've always paid my bills, but it was one of those things where or my taxes, for example, I've always done my taxes too, but I also waited to the last minute to do them, and when push came to shove, it'd be like 2 days and I had to get everything ready, and it just caused so much stress, I realized this could probably be avoided if I just broke this down into a monthly task so I started to really think through, how I could stop this habit of self-sabotage, which is really what procrastination is. Now, procrastination actually can be a good thing sometimes. Sometimes there are some things we should put off, but there are some things that if you're putting off some things that are having a detrimental impact, a negative impact on your lifestyle, on your finances, on your family, then there's probably a problem. And so that's where the book came about so what I did is, in order to tackle this, and when the book started to take shape, I came up with an idea. It was very basic. I was like, I need to get clarity on, what are the things that I'm not doing? What are the things that I'm procrastinating on? What are the unfinished tasks that are in my space, in my computer? In the rooms in all in my home, I had to go through everything, and it was great. So what I did is I just spent a couple of days making a very long list. I just grabbed a piece of a yellow legal pad, put pen to paper, and every time I found anything that was, not in a file, or something that was, a form that had not been filled out, anything that was not finished or had not been started, it went on the list. And this became my anti-procrastination list. Right.
Let me interrupt you 1 second. So
Sure.
This list that you're developing, these are priorities? These are important things.
Mm,
These are just, or is it just everything?
great question. They were not priorities yet. So what I did is I had to get clear on everything that was just unfinished, right? Because I think like the key is to get clarity on everything that is basically taking up space in your mind, in your life, because
Mm,
anything that goes unfinished, I think this probably goes back to maybe David Allan mentioned this in his, his book as well. It was getting things done, right? It's like anything that's in your space that goes unfinished, it's still taking up space in your memory. Yeah. Cause you could be subconsciously thinking about it. And
yes.
so I thought about that, and so yes, you're right. So the list was actually just everything on the list. But then what I did is like, okay, the next step is to take action, which means, we need momentum moving forward. So it wasn't necessarily, I didn't prioritize anything on the list yet. That came later. But what I did is I just picked one thing on the list for every day for about 28 days or 30 days, one thing on that list. I did that one thing. Sometimes it was something as simple as sending an email that was just that, I had to send an email to a publisher or to somebody. Maybe I had to walk down the street to mail a letter, like whatever it was. But that one thing, even though it wasn't the most difficult thing to do, it was important to start racking up those small wins, because this is what happens to a lot of people. When we start to procrastinate, is we start to feel guilty. We put pressure on ourselves. We call ourselves bad names and label ourselves as procrastinators, which, by the way, I realized that's something I had to stop as well, because when you label yourself as, I'm a procrastinator, therefore I put things off, therefore I don't do the work, and then you just keep feeding into that behavior.
Yeah. You set yourself up for it to continue to happen. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I did that for 30 days, and then I was like, all right, this is really good. And then I went ahead and I looked at the list, and I made a list of the hard things on the list, like the things that I really was resistant to doing. It could have been like creating a website was one of them. There was like a list of a dozen things, because some of them were big projects, they were overwhelming, but they were also very necessary for some of them for my business, others for my personal life. And so I made a list of, I think I had like 10, 15, maybe 20 things in there that were priority tasks that had to be done. But then I selected the 3 that were probably like the most difficult to do, the most difficult or would take the most amount of time to do. Right. And from there, I had all these other little things that could be done, and I picked away at those. But when when I drilled down into the hard things on that list, then I would pick one of those things to do every month. So one thing they got my attention, my focus for 1 month. And it didn't always take me 1 month to do this one thing, but there was nothing better than the feeling of when I focused on this one thing for 1 month and got it finished. Because some of these things I had been putting off for years, and there were things on there like forms that had to be filled out, and like just a lot of things that were just, kind of pushed under the rug, so to speak. But that was really where, I had to get that momentum moving forward. That started to break the, I don't know if you'd classify procrastination as a habit or, I guess as a negative habit for sure, but it's really a form of behavior. And without getting into the whole, like where it comes from and how we develop it, I mean, people can just, I don't really think that matters either. The fact is like, I am doing this. And now the only thing that really matters is what am I doing today to get out of it? What am I doing today to break the behavior?
Yes. Yes.
The fact that I used to procrastinate back in high school and didn't do my homework and all that is really irrelevant well, in a sense, it is irrelevant. However, when I look back, you can see the pattern, just like there's a lifetime pattern there actually of, putting things off and putting off the hard things. And I realized like it was such a feeling of freedom when you feel like you actually have control over, yourself actually. And by the way, when you take action on these things and you get them done, getting back to my original point, you build this trust with yourself that you feel like you never had before. It's the trust that I've always wanted with myself, because now trust builds confidence, and now you feel like you can tackle anything.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Anyway, so that was the concept.
It helps to improve with my integrity, right? It helps to improve with my integrity. I can trust myself that when I say I'm going to get this done, I'm going to get it done. I'm not going to just put it off for the next year. One thing that I'm curious about, and this is just me because I like everything to be kind of particular, but I have, for example, like I have an idea book, right? And I put all these ideas in it of things that I want to do,
Mm.
mostly creative stuff, like this script I want to write, a story I want to tell. But so like if I make a list, like I probably have at least 30 projects that I want to get done eventually. They're not priorities right now because, the priorities always shift in our lives, right? So, but how do you make a list of everything and then figure out how do you classify, well, these are the things I'm going to focus on right now because of some reason.
Yeah. So yeah, great question. So it comes down to clarity of your goals, right? And that was the thing is like, if you don't know what your goals are, then it's going to be really hard for you to, I mean, anything on that list could go really. You can just choose anything, I think. But when I knew, I've got like my big goal for, say, my life, my business. And what I do is, I've decided that I have a vision for the lifestyle that I want to build. And so I build my business around that. Whereas before
Yes,
it was
sir.
like, I thought, okay, well, I'm going to build this business first. And, if and when it becomes successful, then I can finally live the life that I wanted. But I reversed that recently, just through, I think, Justin Welsh, somebody who I follow very closely. I love his
Yes.
content. And that's what he said. That's how he built his business. And I thought, that's great. Like decide the life you want to build and then build your business around it. So when I started to, work on that, my goals became very clear, so that's the thing is like, yeah, if you know what your goals are, then you can decide what those priorities are. And if you don't know what your goals are, well, now you know where to begin. By the way, you mentioned having lists and things like that. I mean, I do journaling all the time. I make lists all the time. I can't stop making them. Right. And I do have them in 5 or 10 different journals. And it even got to the point where each journal has its own theme. I have one journal for my goals,
Yes.
another journal for project and things like that. So it's a little bit obsessive, but the good thing is though, is like, you're going to keep having those ideas for things that you want to do and projects. And I think that's a great
Yes.
thing, keep making those projects. It's great, but just, be clear on. So for me, like my goals are the action tasks that I'm working on are the lever movers that are, working, like moving towards my goals. So,
Hmm.
and so one of my goals, for example, is to become yeah, a public speaker. I want to be on the big stages and doing lots of interviews and those kinds of things. um, when I did, I was just very clear on, okay, well, how many podcasts should I be doing? And I just made a list of all the things that could be moving me towards that goal so that every day I'm working on something that's moving me towards that, maybe whether it's 10 or 15 minutes, practicing in the mirror speaking or setting up interviews, those things. So it's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's very, sure, it's very self-motivating, but you also feel like, when you're working on those hard things, and again, like, I mean, I'll spend an hour in the morning. That's actually part of my writing routine is, doing 1 hour in the morning of creating content or sometimes 2 hours a day. And it might be in the afternoon. But the thing is, I have that time blocked in. Now, do I always want to show up and create that content? Not always. There's resistance to it. Just like anything, just like going to the gym. I don't always want to go to the gym. But when I go and I put in that workout, it feels great afterwards. So that's something to just keep in mind that when you're feeling that resistance towards doing the things that, need to get done, but you don't really want to do them because it's not so much about your feelings. Your feelings may tell you that, hey, I don't really feel like doing this. And then you're going to talk yourself out of doing it. But for me, I project myself like after I've done it, how am I going to feel? How is Scott going to look after he shows up and actually gets this thing done? Like visualizing yourself after the fact, it's very powerful because if you can take your emotion and push that into the future, and now you're actually, you can actually emotionally feel yourself like, succeeding and pushing forward with your plans. Like to your point, it's you're building that trust with yourself and that integrity as well, right? So I think that's a really good goal to strive for, though. I mean, because if you develop that kind of attitude, you're taking action every day towards something that's moving you towards your goal. Again, one of those levers that you can just it's one of those levers that every time you pull it, you're moving, you're jumping ahead. That's something I think that you want to keep striving for, and that's, if you're doing that, you don't have to worry about procrastination because that won't have any hold over you anymore. And when you do feel like, oh, there's something I've got to do, but I'm feeling resistance towards it. Well, maybe you don't need to take action on it right away, but at least just that self-awareness that you're actually pushing it off, that's actually a good thing, because now you know what the trigger is. Give you a quick example. There's a pile of receipts behind me that I've got to get done for taxes, and I've been putting it off for a week. And every time my accountant asks for it, I'm like, I'm going to get that to you tomorrow. And I don't do it, right? But I've done all these other things, like I've, working on another book and this and that. But every time I look at that pile of receipts, I can feel that feeling again of like, oh yeah, okay, I've been here before, the list just keeps getting bigger. The pile keeps getting bigger. It doesn't go away. So I just sat down tonight, actually, before we got here for 30 minutes and just sorted them out. And I probably spent, I'd say I spent more time, probably 3 or 4 times more energy into avoiding doing those things than I did in actually getting it done, so.
Yeah. It's amazing how that happens. You put something off, you put it off, and then you say, for some reason, you're just like, okay, I just have to do it. And you stop everything and do it. And then you're like, gosh, it only took me 5 minutes. And I, I put it off for a month and thought about it more than 5 minutes. Yeah, it's amazing. One thing that I want to talk about is, so I know that this book really had a lot of success behind it, this idea and this concept, and getting this book out there. What were some of the other principles around the book that people really gravitated to?
Yeah, one of the principles in the book, I think once we got into, I think it was section 2, maybe section 3, where I have 21 steps that people can take to, tackle their procrastination. So they're really just like some like simple things in there, like having accountability, like tell somebody, here's one, like tell somebody about, what are you working on? Talk about this with people, right? The other thing is, I'm really big on modeling as well. So if there's something that I want to accomplish, and I learned this way back in the day, probably from, I think, reading Tony Robbins, maybe Jim Rohn, they talked about this all the time, and they still do, or Tony still does. But he's like, if you want to achieve something, find somebody who's already done that thing, right? So that's one thing I'm really big on. And I mentioned that in the book as well, because, I want to be modeling the action takers, people who are getting things done, people who are successful in their business, in their family life. So anything that you want to be successful at, find somebody who's successful at it. It sounds like a very obvious thing, but it's surprising how many people try to reinvent the wheel, or, they think they're going to go off and figure something out when in fact other people have already done it. Now you just have to model what they're doing, and you may not get the same result that they're getting, but you're going to get a result, right? And it's probably going to be maybe a good result, because at least you're moving forward with, taking action. So that's probably one thing in there that I think a lot of people mentioned. The other thing is, I have a section in there on, actually tackling resistance and fear, because, the fears that we have when it comes to, well, we'll say, because the book was based on procrastination, there were like some, the fears around procrastination. One of them is the imposter syndrome, actually. When people want to try new things, they're actually held back from doing that thing because they have the fear of, imposter syndrome shows up, then they tend to not do it, right? Which is a form of it can morph into a form of procrastination as well. But I think it's important just to recognize that when something like that shows up, it's actually a good thing. Imposter syndrome is not a bad thing, because it's showing you that you're doing something you've never tried before. And, when we're doing things that we never tried before, we're going to feel fear around that. We're going to come up with excuses as to why we're not ready yet, and again, we push it off. So my attitude towards this now is more like, I want to recognize when I'm actually pushing something off. And when I see it, I'm like, okay, what could I do right now just to get this out of the way? Sure, maybe it's like tackling the pile of receipts I mentioned. Maybe it's going for a run, actually. I went for a run tonight, and I haven't taken a run in months. Yet every day I tell myself, maybe today's that day when I'm going to get some cardio in, and I never do it. Next thing you know, I'm in front of the TV with popcorn. There's nothing wrong with that, But if it's a reward that I'm giving myself after running, great, But so I went for a run. I lasted about 10 minutes, maybe. I did a kilometer and I was done. But it's like, okay, great. I'm obviously not that great at running. I go to the gym all the time, but muscle training and cardio are two very different things, right? So tomorrow I'm going to run again. Now, this is leading back into, putting it off and just saying, I'm not going to do it, because what is the best way to set yourself up for success? Get rid of any of the resistance you're going to feel when you go to do that thing. Borrowing an idea from one of my mentors that I model, who had a similar problem with working out. He said he puts his gym clothes and his shoes by his bed every morning. When he wakes up, it's right there. He just, without thinking, puts it on. He's out the door. He's at the gym or he's running, right? So I do the same thing now. I put my running shoes are by the door, gym clothes are ready. And that way, when it comes time to say, I wonder if I should take a run. Oh, I can't find my shoes. Well, they're right there. I even put my socks near my shoes.
Yeah, you make it easy.
It's so easy
for yourself. Yeah.
But the thing is, you can apply that to anything, right? If you're, writing a book, same thing. I mean, I've always, been writing for years, but I still struggle with showing up every day. So I keep the book that I'm currently working on. I keep the Word document open all the time on my desktop. It's the first thing that I see as soon as I sit down to open the computer. Just so that it's a reminder, like, oh, there it is. I don't have to go looking for the Word document. So, which means I don't have an excuse for not finding that. But yeah, I think that's just an important point too, is, just recognizing the triggers that you use to push things off again and again and again. And when you see those triggers, go, oh, there it is again. Like every time I see an ice cream, I want to eat it, for example, because cutting out sugar was one of the things that I have always struggled with, like chocolate and ice cream and all these things. And again, so just going back to the topic of the procrastination is like, there's another flip side to that as well. Like, it's not just pushing off the things that we don't want to do, but it's how do you stop quitting the things that you want to stop doing, yet you keep doing these things again? Like, maybe you're eating sugar all the time, like I occasionally do. How do I stop these things? So I recognized the triggers. Every time I went to the supermarket, I went straight for the candy section. I was probably the only 50-year-old in the candy section with a bunch of kids who were all in there looking for chocolate, and we're all fighting over the last candy bar. But so anyway, just little things like that, right? So I guess my message for everybody is, whatever it is that you want to do or you don't want to do, recognize the trigger that's holding you back, right? And once you do, then because self-awareness is the key, and once you're self-aware of like what that is, then you're able to say, there it is. And then you can actually make a conscious decision in the moment to not give in to that thing, or to start something new, to start that thing that you've always wanted to, start working on. So.
Yeah. This is great. I mean, there are certain things in my life that goals of mine, things that I want to do. Like, for example, with my health, I have went through a bunch of different things and have come to the belief that if I do this thing, I want to do this thing, this plan, to get results in my life because other people have done that. I want to model myself after those people, but what they're doing is rather difficult. It requires a lot of work. I need to do something that's probably going to take an hour and a half every day. And so because of all these different things and me, like, what's that going to do to me? How am I going to react? What if I have a reaction to it? And then like, I can't work all day or something. Like, I have all these things. So, like, this is something that I can apply definitely to what we're talking about here, to kind of make a plan and start moving towards it instead of just keeping it there in the background all the time. Like, it's something I want to do to improve my health, and I leave it alone. And then, I have something that happens, a symptom or whatever, and I'm like, God, I really need to do this because I want to get better and I want to feel more vital, So I think everybody has things like that in their life, things that they want to do that they've been putting off because of whatever reason. So I see why it's such a great topic to talk about. Let's segue a minute, and I just want to segue into your personal journey as an author, as a speaker. Tell me how this thing started, that you started writing, and let's talk about how you did that and how you eventually got to get some books out there that sold 500,000 copies. That's very, very incredible, really. That is not the standard. I mean, I think the standard is if a book sells 2 or 3,000 copies or 4,000 copies, like that's a lot in today's world. So let's talk about that a little bit, your journey as a writer and why you started writing.
Okay, yeah. I'll just go back a few years. I won't make it a long story, but I started writing when I was probably junior high school, maybe elementary school. Loved reading Stephen King. I actually started writing fiction, so I have a very active imagination, like a lot of creatives do. And I started writing. I wrote my first book when I was 13 or 14 years old. Just sat down one day, just started writing it out. I stopped about a year later and I had a book. I did not publish it, but and to this day, I don't know what happened to that book actually, but I do remember like that was the beginning of everything, I think. And I probably, eventually I stopped writing. Life took over, went to university, got a job and all that stuff. And then, I came to Japan back in 98. And how I got here was I was going through, I think, a period in my life where I had to make some serious changes regarding my mindset, my lifestyle, everything. I was always, out in the bars, drinking all the time. I just had this very chaotic lifestyle, which I seemed to really love at the time until I tried to stop it and I couldn't. So once I cleaned everything up and I got really clear on what I wanted, I realized, hey, wouldn't it be great if I just took a trip overseas and, went backpacking? Because, and I had a career as an electrical engineer. I was already working and, I had a pretty good lifestyle. I was living in Victoria City. I'm from Canada, so I was on Vancouver Island at the time. But what happened, how I got here is during this period where I started reading self-help books because I think one of my mentors or coaches at the time gave me this book. It wasn't a Tony, like I can't remember what book it was, but it was this like 20 life lessons of something. But I read it and I was like, wow, this is really good. I enjoy reading the self-help stuff. So I went and read another one, and then came across Tony Robbins' book, Awaken the Giant Within, in the bookstore. Took it home that day, started reading it, and it just like changed my life, right? Because there was a chapter in it called How to Build a Compelling Future, right? And I thought, wow, I like that. Like that sounds exciting. I don't know if it's something I can do, but I'd like to give it a try. So what I did within a week, I turned my apartment into a vision board. I had like stuff on the walls, like places I wanted to go, things I wanted to do, positivity quotes everywhere on index cards, all on my wall and everything, So I went to the library and I started taking out all these books on how to speak Thai and Vietnamese. And I wasn't thinking about Japan at the time, that came later. But what I was doing is because I had made the decision that I wanted to travel to Southeast Asia. I think because I met a lot of people who'd been there before and they were telling me about all these adventures. And, I used to be a very adventurous person too. And it wouldn't be great if I could do that. I just made a decision one day. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do that. After reading Tony's book and building out this vision board and everything, I was like, I'm going there. I'm doing that. Like 1 year from now, I'm going to be in Thailand. And that was just a decision I made. I didn't change it at all. But what happens when you make a decision, that's what I call like like a pivotal decision where you cannot go back after that. Something takes place. The universe started listening to whatever I wanted. And 3 months later, I was just kind of picked up the newspaper one day, and my roommate brought it home, opened up the newspaper, and I never read the newspaper in my life. I was just open to the entertainment section or something, right? But just opened it up that one day, and right there was an advertisement that said "Teach English in Japan," and I thought, apply now. And I thought, yeah, I'm going to do that. So I did. I applied, got the job, and but like 6 months later, this company was flying us over to Japan. Another thing is, I ended up here when just going back about a year earlier, I had decided when I made that decision, I was going to move to Southeast Asia. 1 year from that moment I think I even decided the date was going to be like March 26th. Well, as it turned out, when the company brought us over to Japan, it was actually March 26th. So I don't know how that happened. But anyway, what happened, I got here, I completely changed my profession. I went from being like an electrical engineer to working with high voltage equipment to suddenly teaching business English in companies in Japan. Now I have no education, like no background in education. I mean, like as a teacher. But the thing is, the only requirement was you had to speak English. So, so that was, and it was great. I just loved it. Now, what happened with the books is that I was still reading self-help books and fiction, still always loved books, right? And that's the thing, I would say after I was here for about 10 years, I started getting restless again. And that for me, that's a trigger that something needs to change, like, or there's something I'm not doing. And I realized what it was. It's like, I've got to write those books I was talking about like years ago, that was on my vision board back home, and I'd never forgotten it. So, and the thing I had lots of books on how to write books and how to, apply to publishers and all these things. And I read all those books, and I was actually procrastinating on writing for like a long period of time until one day I just got so tired of telling people that I was going to be a writer. One of my friends finally said to me one day, just show me something, show me that you're actually going to do this thing. And that really woke me up. Right. And I just made a decision that day. I sat down with a pen and paper and started penning out a self-help book. Now I could have gone with fiction, and I love fiction and I still write it occasionally, but something told me I had to go and build out this, this personal development book, because I'd read so many of these books. Keeping this knowledge in was just, if it was just for myself, it just seemed like a waste, so everything I learned, everything that I had absorbed over the years that I was applying, I was going to put it into a book. So it started that way. And I spent 3 or 4 years just writing content and editing it and doing all that. This was before self-publishing, right? So once Amazon had launched their self-publishing platform back in 2012, 2013, this is the thing too, if you want to if you want to be ready for an opportunity, you have to prepare for it. So when that opportunity came around, I already had my book ready to go. In fact, I was pitching it to publishers, got a few rejection letters. And then when I realized I could self-publish it, I was like, all right, now I didn't know anybody who was doing this. Like, it's still a new thing, and nobody was really doing it. So I just read a couple of blog posts. I hired some designer online and an editor, and put my book together and put it out there. Now, here's the thing. I've never published a perfect book, and certainly those first few books weren't perfect. But if I had hesitated and been afraid to put it out there because of the fear of criticism and rejection, probably never would have done it. So I just thought, I'm just going to put it out there, because the dream really was just to have my book published. I mean, I wasn't thinking about selling 1 million copies. I mean, if I did, yes, but to be honest, I didn't believe that was possible. But I did believe I could publish the book, right? So I was just going like one step at a time. Now, what happened going forward a little bit? I put out a few books. Things were going well. I wasn't really selling any books. I was working in my full-time job still. I was still teaching in a corporation. And so that was taking care of the family and the bills. So I didn't have to be working as a writer to pay my bills. But I would say something interesting happened around book number 4, maybe book number 5. I think it was with Relaunch Your Life, actually. The book actually was just kind of took off. I can't explain it. And I'm not at the time, I wasn't a great marketer, wasn't a great salesperson or any of that stuff, and now I'm pretty good at marketing. I'm okay at sales, still a lot to learn there. But back then I was just, didn't know really anything, but I knew how to write, and I knew how to put material out there, and I knew how to tell a story. And the book just took off. It started actually selling. And I think within a few months, it was actually, I was earning more from Amazon than it was my full-time job. And that was when I realized, this is interesting. I wasn't expecting this one. And then what happened, I ended up getting an email from a publisher. I think it was in India or something. But anyway, they wanted to buy the rights to the book, and I thought, well, I've never heard of this before. This doesn't sound right. Publishers coming to you. So I thought there had to be something up about this, but I went for it anyway, because I thought, what have I got to lose, So this, and then it happened again. It was like this publisher from Vietnam, and then one from Thailand. I thought, like, what's going on here? And they actually, I didn't have to put anything into it. They bought the rights to the book. They did all the translating. They published it, and that was it. And then I would get some royalties, and so that was quite a while ago. But what happened though, just fast forwarding a little bit, and over the years, I put out more books, of course. And I eventually started coaching people on how to publish books and market books, because there was a demand for that. But when I published Do the Hard Things First, something happened with that book. Within 3 or 4 months, I started getting these requests again from publishers saying, hey, we want to publish your book. And I was like, okay, well, and by that time I had already had some contracts with like a few publishers, and a couple of publishers in India, one in Russia, just like a few here and there. But with that book, it just, again, like, it wasn't a planned success. It took off, and I started getting, a publisher from Korea wanted the book, and then a publisher from again, from Vietnam and India and Thailand, and then they just started flooding in, right? And within a year and a half, I think I had about a dozen publishers actually who bought the rights to the book. So what happens in this case is like, um, so outside of the US and outside of traditional publishing, there's actually a large market, which I didn't realize, and apparently a lot of other people didn't realize either. There's a large market for like hundreds of other publishers in all these different countries who actually are looking for books to purchase, and they'll buy the rights to it, pay you an advance royalty, and then they'll pay you royalties like once they publish the book, which might be 6 months to a year once they buy it, right? So yeah, I mean, that just happened a lot. And I think what happened is that, so apparently my friend who works in the publishing business, he told me that what happens is when this kind of thing takes place is that your book gets put onto a kind of like a special list, and it gets passed around a lot. And so I was getting offers all the time, and I signed 2 more last week. One was with China, like a publisher in China, and I've got a few more on my desk already, but they just keep coming in. The great thing is like, it's, I can develop a relationship with these publishers, and they can, they'll publish the books and everything, do all the translations. And I think there's nothing greater than, and that's kind of where, like, selling a large amount of books, a lot of it came from that. Yes, from some from US sales. And I also have a publisher in Japan now. And I think we sold about, I don't know, like maybe 100,000 books last year. So they published a book, or we're up to 2 books. We're doing a 3rd one as well, so, but again, like, it's, the great thing about it is, like, as a self-publisher, you do all the work, like all the marketing, and it's quite expensive because you have to put a lot of your money into it. You have to develop real skills or hire people for those skills, which I've done both. I'm always learning new things and hiring people for things that I would rather not do. But, when you have a contract with a publisher, now they can go one way or the other, I think. But as long as they're not asking you for money, which if somebody does, you should probably just run. But if they're buying the rights to your book and they're going to publish it in another language, and you just have to collect a paycheck every month or once every year. Sometimes they'll pay you randomly, but I mean, yeah, like, why not? So, and also the great thing about it is, like, people in these other countries now can enjoy your material. That's the best thing about it is, and again, like, none of this was planned, but I realized what I did with the publishers, though. Like, I would ask them, well, you bought several books already. Like, what other kind of books are you looking for? And they would actually tell me, and then I would go and I would build those books, right? With the intention of, like, if they're looking to buy these books, then maybe these other publishers in other countries like Korea and Vietnam, and like, there was just, like, there were so many, right? So anyway, we're kind of we're working out like, relationships with the publishers so that we can publish a certain amount of books with them every year, and that's kind of where the volume comes from. But it was really exciting because again, but here's the point to all of this is, like, just going back, like, if you have something that you want to do, maybe you want to write a book and publish it, because I work with new authors all the time who are writing books and they haven't published them, and one of the biggest fears is, like, what if no one likes my book? What if no one buys it? And I'm always like, well, okay, but if you don't put the book out there, no one's going to buy it anyway. So, the only way to fail is to not do anything, right? So, and that's just my approach to everything, really. It's just like, yeah. I mean, I've put money into a lot of things that never worked out very well, and I could have stopped then, but it's like, well, okay, I kind of lost on that deal, but, or sometimes, hired the wrong person or whatever it is. But I mean, that's just part of the business, so, you know,
Give yourself enough credit. Like, when you talk about, that the book was successful and it kind of just happened, I would say, well, you wrote like 20 books before, and you've been doing this for several years, and you've been committed to it. And you talked earlier about preparation is part of the key, right? You got to prepare for those opportunities. I would say, really, you prepared for that, and you did your best to put everything in there and put yourself into it. And that's why you got results. But I do understand, like, you didn't plan to sell 500,000 copies. I get that part. But that's awesome. That's awesome. Let's talk a little bit about your process. What's your
Mm.
process like day to day? You know, I know you mentioned before, like you try to spend 2 hours. Is that what you said every day writing?
Yeah, I have a 2 hour window every day where, well, I call it my content creation time. So I'm always working on a new book. I'm trying to slow down from that a little bit, and because I'm building out the course platform now, which we're launching this year. The challenge that I find is that I love publishing books and I just can't stop. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with that challenge, but my day-to-day process though is, yeah, I wake up very early. I usually do, I might do 2 or 3 hours of coaching in the morning, some mornings, but I'm usually up early, doing early morning meditation, deep breathing. We'll go to the gym. So I have to do these things to, like, for me, like taking care of my health is the number one thing, and also like mental health, physical health, and spiritual health,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So if those are
I'm with
aligned,
you.
yeah, those are aligned, you can do anything, right? But yeah, I'll have a 2 hour window. So yeah, 2 hour content creation window where I'm actually creating a newsletter for my list as well. So we have an email list of subscribers on the list, and we put out an email, or yeah, we put out a newsletter every week. And so there's always something that I'm working on. That's, again, it's one of those levers that is moving me towards my goal, which aside from becoming an international public speaker, is to become one of the biggest publishers in the world. Kind of a big goal, but then again, it's like, well, if it's not a big goal, well, what else is there to,
That's right.
yeah, yeah. So, because I think, yeah, I mean, that's a good point you mentioned though, is like sometimes when you're in the middle of it, you don't realize how much you're actually doing or achieving, or, you just, for me, it's just like the day to day. And, like I think it was last week, I published 6 books in German. We've been translating these books in German. I finally just put them out there, and I didn't think anything of it. But when I mentioned it to someone, they're like, wow, okay, well, that's not something people do every week. But to me, it was just like
Yeah.
one of those things that I just I'd had it on my back burner for so long. I was just like, I'm just going to get them out there, So, but again, it's like, that's all momentum, and, but again, I always
So,
think back.
so let me interrupt you again. You're 2 hours a day. That's your goal of writing.
Mm,
That's the 2 hours that includes whatever you're going to write for your newsletter or a new book that you're working on, right? Something.
Yeah, what I'll do, good question. Yeah, just to circle back on that. That 2 hours will be focused on one thing. So what I'll do is, like, for my newsletter, I'll do two, maybe 3 hour, a 2 or 3 hour time block. And I'll just focus on that one thing, because I can build out 3 or 4 posts for my newsletter during that time. And then what I'll do is I'll pre-schedule them for, you know, maybe the week. If maybe some weeks I put out 2 newsletters, but I try to keep it to one. And so I can build out my content in one afternoon and then schedule it for the month, actually. So the next day might be a 2 or sometimes 3 hour time block for a book I'm working on, which could be writing that content, or sometimes it's doing self-editing, but it is focused on that one book. What I found is that, and people may have different working styles, but when I spread myself too thin, when I try to multitask, or if I'm spending a half hour on this and 1 hour on this and 20 minutes on this, it's very ineffective for me anyway. I've proven to myself that
Yes,
multitasking
yes,
just doesn't
yes.
work.
Yeah, I think I had learned actually from Tony Robbins this idea a long time ago. I don't remember what book it was, but like 15 years ago, he talked about chunking.
Mm,
And to get things done, to just say, okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to work for 4 or 5 hours. I'm going to just do everything to get this
mm,
thing
mm,
done, rather than spending a little bit of time over periods of times and jumping tasks.
mhm.
And I've always liked that and benefited from that for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So that is the approach I take. Yeah. And just the other thing I do as well is, the night before, I will spend 15, 20 minutes, maybe just, going through, building up my calendar for the day, which is something that was really hard for me to do. Just, I'm one of these people that, although I'm very productive, I think, I never really had a calendar. I just, like, things were just all over the place, and I was just working on this and working on this. But when I started to put my calendar together, things flowed much better. It's like, oh, this is what it feels like to actually have a schedule, like having the routine, things that I think
Yes.
some productivity gurus say, they live by that. So I'll spend time in the evening putting that together, and then I'll decide what my number one priority is for the next day, which might be something I'm working on during that too. And sometimes it is a 3-hour time block. Sometimes I go a bit longer if I have time during the day. So yeah.
So let's segue for a second. You said you're building out the course platform. Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. I think the courses is something that I built courses for publishing before, but never built a course around my books. And I think because it comes down to I have such a comfort level when it comes to writing. It's I'm not saying writing is easy, but I can put together a framework. I can put together content very easily. And then when it came to building out the course, that was just always something that something I put off. But my people that were my subscribers, or sometimes I would get fan mail and they would ask, "Hey, do you have courses? Do you have something else we can sign up for?" So the demand has always been there, but I've just always been so busy working on new books and putting it out there. I always thought, okay, well, I'll get to the courses after I launch the next book. But the thing is, there was always a new book coming, right? So I was always just staying focused on building content. Now I've got so much content that I realized, well, okay, well, maybe now it's actually time to go back and just, slow down on the content a bit and market what you've got. Because someone said to me the other day, like, you've got all these frameworks and material you built out, and 99% of the people out there probably don't know about it, because not everybody's going to buy your books, right? So people are looking for different ways to absorb it. They might be watching your interviews. They might be, they're looking for your course platform because they like to go through videos instead. So
Yeah, and
I'm now,
as you go out there in the world and you're speaking to audiences, small and
mm,
large, you have something else to talk about. That, hey, if you like these concepts and ideas I talk about, check out my course platform. Yeah, I think it's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. And just last thing on that, the course that I'm building out is several mini courses, but I'm working on a Do the Hard Things First course for the first book. So we're very excited to push that out.
That's awesome. So I know you wanted to talk about your public speaking journey, and
Mm,
let's talk about that, because that's a big deal. My fantasy. I'm sorry, I said the word fantasy, which makes it sound negative. I apologize. My goal is to be able to sell from the stage. This is something big. Like, I see
mm,
all these speakers that they learn their craft and they're out there honing their craft, and they end up in a position where they could sell from the stage. And like, I'm into sales. Sales and influence is my thing. I eat, sleep, and drink it. I sell every
mm,
day. I'm a high
mm,
level achiever,
mm.
you know, very goal oriented, incredible work ethic. But I love people, and I understand people, and baby, touch. But anyhow,
Mhm,
so when I see that, I'm like, my God, that's what I should do. Like, that's the
mhm.
best that you could be. Just you and your voice on a stage, and
Yeah,
sharing an inspirational, motivational message to get people interested, and then being able to sell from the stage. I think it's fantastic. So tell me a little bit about your journey with that and where we're going.
yeah, that's the dream. So here's the thing. I've been terrified of public speaking my whole life. Like, speaking one-on-one is fine, one to a few is good, and then when it becomes one to many, or just maybe in a small group of people that I don't know, I just I get really anxious and I can't speak in front of people. Like, it's always been, it depends on the situation, I think, right? But here's the thing, similar to you, I love communicating, and I've always been a teacher. I taught here for 20 years, and I've actually been on stages here, not talking about my books and stuff like that yet, but just doing presentations for in front of, like, for companies and stuff like that. So that was, I had no problems with that at all. But um, there were times when I'd be like in a room where I had to share something and be vulnerable in front of like maybe 20, 30, 50 people. And wow, I just like when all eyes were on me, I just felt like this wasn't just anxiety. It was, sometimes I felt like I was going to pass out. I just wanted to, they'd be like, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself. And I was like, no, like, I don't want to talk about myself. It was,
Yeah, let me talk about a topic or something, not about me.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But, once I started putting the books out there and they got a little bit of attention, I started getting asked to do some podcast interviews. And this was way back in, like, like going back quite a few years. And I remember my first actual podcast interview or radio interview. Like I was up all night practicing. They sent me a few questions. I was trying to perfect the questions and just hoping that I got them right. And and it went. I did a few podcast interviews like that, and it didn't go very smoothly. I think just because I was just so tense, just worrying so much that they're going to ask me a question that I didn't know, or ask me something about something that was in my book that I forgot about. Because that happens all the time, by the way. Someone will say, "Hey, tell us about this thing you wrote in your book," and I'm like, "Did I write that? I honestly can't remember." So, but anyway, yeah, this went on for quite a while, and occasionally it still pops up. But I think that what happened actually, it was like earlier this year. It was similar to like if you'd asked me 20 years ago what I wanted to do, I would have said I want to be an author. Like I want to publish books, right? And if you were to ask me now what I want to do, I still want to do that, but actually I want to be, just as you said, I want to be on stage in front of one to many, sharing the message, sharing the story, sharing the frameworks to help people. And for me, that really now that jazzes me up. Like that's the dream, like that's the new dream, right? But when I think about it, I think it's something I always wanted to do. It's just that the thought of doing it was so terrifying. I didn't think it was going to be for me. So probably earlier this year, I decided, you know what? I've got to get over this thing, because every time I get on a podcast, I freeze up and I just can't speak. And, so I want to get over that, because there's got to be the exposure therapy, right? Like I wrote about that in one of my books, and I was like, I wrote about exposure therapy, and I'm telling people to get out there and do these things, and I'm not doing these things. So that's not good. So I thought I'm going to, so I set a goal for myself to do 200 podcast interviews this year. So
yes.
we were talking about earlier just before we got on here, is like, I've done like 60 or 70 in the last couple of months. And I noticed like, the first 5 or 10 were a little bit stiff and rigid, but after that, things just started to get easier. I think I started to relax more. They'd send me questions ahead of time, and sometimes I wouldn't even look at them. I just jump on and was able to answer them anyway, and so, it's just, so I figured, okay, well, if this is working, then what's next? Like, how can I get better at this? Right? Because, see, like, I'm not a great public speaker yet, but that's okay. Like, how do you get to that level? So that's kind of like what I'm looking at now, is like, who can I model who's already done it? There's a lot of people out there who've already done it, and when I actually listened to their story, they're like, I just practiced a lot. I was watching an interview with Alex Hormozy the other day. It says like when he launched his book, maybe a few months ago, he had like 500,000 people in a he was on stage. I think he had 500,000 people in a Zoom room or something like that. But, he's like, he practiced that like 100 times, because people were saying, it was so perfect. You're so great. And he's like, yeah, but I practiced it 99 times, and it's just interesting. Like hearing that to me is like, oh, okay. So I guess practice does matter, and you do have to get out there and do it, because what happened with me is like, I'm like, okay, like I'll do this thing after I get really good at it. I'll practice in front of the mirror for 20 hours and then I'll go do the thing. But what happens though is like you actually get on stage and you forget about the mirror practice, because now you're on stage, and because you have to get good at that, and you probably just have to do. I don't even think we should frame it up as like having a bad speech or having a bad interview. It's like you went out there, you did your best. The next one will just get better, and that's progress. That's all it is. It's just progress.
Yeah, but when you see these speakers like William Rye, who wrote Getting the Yes, he does this talk about it, and he goes around the world sharing it. I mean, I don't think he does it anymore, but he did in the past. And you see him do one of these presentations, and you could tell this guy has practiced this over and over again. He gets the audience involved, and he obviously has created this system of how he involves them, and he's practiced with audiences. I mean, you could tell a lot has gone into it, and that's why it's so darn good. And, he gets asked to come to all these places to do the talk. Yeah, it's fantastic. I love it. Yeah, anything in life worth doing is something worth doing well.
Mm.
For example, for the last 20 years, sales and influence and sales training has been my thing. I eat it, sleep it, drink it, read about it, listen to it,
Mm.
practice it every day, training every day. Even still today, I'm very good. I got the touch, but I still spend at least an hour every day training and getting my mind right to stay on top, just like a sports person would shoot 100 baskets, 200 baskets, at
Mhm.
lunchtime to stay focused and keep their game up. And now doing the same thing with public speakings and things like that. Exactly, like you got to start incorporating in your life and practice every day. Yeah, so it definitely works. It definitely works. I love it.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Yeah. You just have to be okay with making mistakes and knowing, like, you get better with every discussion. And again, I think, if you love people, if you love communicating, then I think those are the most important things. Because people are going to, I think they're going to gravitate towards your story, and especially gravitating towards the truth. And I find myself on, podcasts like talking about things that I never thought I'd talk about. And then, the fear of like that vulnerability, what do people think? And then, I hear like, oh, I watched your, like, now people are, instead of like what's been happening now lately is, instead of people telling me, oh, I saw your book or I read your book, they're telling me, listen to your interview on da da da, which did not happen before, because obviously they're getting out there. But that's part of, like, to me, that's like, okay, great. Well, that means I should just keep doing more of that. Good feedback. Yeah. But I mean, nobody's, yeah. So anyway, yeah. So, yeah, nobody's come forward and said, that interview really sucked. I don't know. I mean, and that's okay if it did, because it's like, well, yeah, maybe that was one of the first interviews I did, and things were just off a little bit. But hey, again, I think, just going back to, again, like, love quoting Tony Robbins, but he always said, like, the measure of success is progress, and if that's it, that's just that one word. It's just all progress, so not
Yes.
perfection.
Yeah. The second major reinvention that I did in my life back in the 90s, like 96, 97, I made a lot of changes and I was doing something different. And you had talked about imposter syndrome and you talked about doing different things. I had a lot of fear around this idea, and some of it was some beliefs, some things that I told myself that was a lie. But until I opened up and spoke with another person who I trusted, who was a mentor of mine that had my best interests at heart, when I shared these things with him, he told me, I don't know where you got that idea. That's total bullshit, So what I wanted to say is what really helped me was building a support system around living my dream and living this new life and achieving things I never did before. And it was that support system that gave me the confidence to keep going and keep doing this. Instead of feeling like I'm afraid I'm doing something I never did before, who am I to go out there and do this? And at the time, what ended up happening is by 1988, 99, I started going around speaking about my expertise and what I had learned those last few years and what I was doing, and projects that I was getting out there in the world. Because I was a filmmaker, and I still am, but I don't do it as much anymore as I did, back in the 90s and the early 2000s. But what I'm trying to allude to is I didn't realize, like, I was public speaking, doing one to many, and this was what was actually getting me the results in my life that I was building this business with. And eventually I kind of stopped doing it because things got so good and I started bringing, $1 million a year of business that I didn't have to worry about it anymore. And then it was just a matter of doing that first thing that you mentioned, which was, you're right, it was backwards, where I built the business first and then tried to figure out how to make my life work around that, which eventually I had to kill everything and start over and do it the way that we're talking about now, which is to build the business around the lifestyle that I want to live, which is what I ended up doing. But anyhow, my point is that it was so instrumental. And so now, knowing all that, the last few years, I'm like, I don't know why I ever stopped, because this is really an important thing. Even in sales, just imagine you can talk to some great audiences and you could pitch 50 people for something instead of just pitching one. This is like, it makes a lot of sense for growing a business. So I wanted to just get that off my chest. And now let me just say, before we wrap up, I know you want to talk about some key takeaways and whatnot. So let's take a few minutes here and let's talk about some of the key takeaways you want the audience to have, and also anything that I haven't asked you about that you want to talk about.
Sure. Yeah. I think one of the things I get asked a lot is like you had asked me about my my daily routine, my work routine, things like that. But I think too, just one of my favorite words is yes, clarity. Clarity really is the key to, I think, like not just goal setting, but being able to create the lifestyle that you want. You have to be, I don't know, 70 or 80% clear on what it is that you don't have to be 100% yet, but you have to have a really good indication of what it is that you want. Because if you don't, then, well, it's like the analogy of, getting in a car and just driving and, if you don't have a destination, you'll never arrive there, or any direction is a good one, I think. So what I do for this though is, aside from spending some time at night building my calendar, I do spend time every day. I'll do half-hour meditation, and just to define what meditation really is, it's really just, look, like I go to a meditation retreat every Sunday. Actually, it's near my home where I sit down with like 20 monks, Japanese monks, and it's a great time. We just like sit there for an hour and kind of meditate. It's kind of neat, and I just enjoy the atmosphere. It's in this gorgeous like old like 500-year-old temple or something. So,
Yeah.
but the thing is like taking time out to, taking time out for yourself, right? Sitting down, doing thinkification or deep thinking. Thinkification, I think, was something coined by Tom Bilyeu, one of my great mentor coach, so just, I listen to his stuff all the time, but he talks about this too, is where, just getting quiet with yourself. Because one of the greatest things that I have been moving towards is having that inner peace, whereas, I think lifestyle, it used to be very chaotic and very like I would, self-sabotage things and all this. And I realized, like, when I started to work on deep breathing, do some meditation every day, doing journaling, just writing down my ideas and things like that, I started to get really calm after a while. And it was a little bit scary because I never really had that before. I found, like, you put me in the middle of a party with a bunch of people, I didn't really mingle very well, and I still probably don't. But now, if you put me in the middle of a crowded room with a bunch of people I don't know, I'm still like, I can be very calm. And whereas before I'd be very anxious, like, oh, I hope they don't talk to me. What will I say? Is this social anxiety that I used to have. So I think where this is leading is that if you want to if you want to build the life that you want, it really does start with, we'll call it the path of personal growth, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
that's a never ending path. Like, I love I think Robert Frost, he wrote the poem of The Road Less Traveled, right? And I always think about that because, I took the road less traveled, and that's made all the difference. So I try to encourage people to just think about those words as well. Not to say that you always have to take the road less traveled, but there's something when you are moving down that path and you feel like, you're all alone, like there's nobody else around you, you don't have any support. I don't think you're ever really alone, especially if you feel like what you're doing, what you stand for, what your mission is about. If you feel like, not just, if you can really like tap into that and kind of, create that kind of energy where you're actually, you're building your opportunities now, you're building your
Mm-hmm.
future. Like, it really is a path of intention, right? So I
Yes.
just want people to think about that when they're,
Yeah,
if you're,
meditation, spirituality, this is like a major, major part of my life. It started 36 years ago, and it's never changed. And I've just grown and grown and grown in it. My third reinvention that I did, that I totally changed my life, was all focused on taking a couple of years to retreat from everything and everyone and just really focus on my spirituality and my physical health. And that has got me so much fulfillment in my life. It's been amazing, but I want to say, like, I have some beliefs real quick. And like, I believe that there is a true me, the real me, so to speak, that is my essence, my aura, my soul, my spirit, right? And then I also believe that the mind and body are one thing. They're not two different things. A lot of people seem to be confused, that they think the body and the mind operate separately. They actually is one thing, I believe. And the third belief that's very important to me is that there's something quite different with the idea of mindfulness and meditation. They're not the same thing, they're totally separate. And so, yes, I meditate so that I can get in touch with the real me, so that I can be open to the possibilities of the universe, so that I can listen, so I can get that intuition, that voice of reason, that voice of conscience, get the answers to my, I'm praying, affirming, I'm putting the intentions out there. And then, I got to listen to the feedback, to the opportunities. I like when you were talking about earlier, I'm sorry, I'm going to ramble right now, but I like when you were talking about earlier how you set goals for something, and you said, I want to live in Southeast Asia, but then the opportunity came along to live in Japan, and you went for it. And I was just writing an article that I haven't finished yet, but I'm almost finished with it, that has to do about goal setting, not locking you into something, but being open to the opportunities and what happens, right? Because if you say, I want it to be green and blue with a white stripe down the middle, then you might get something that's a wonderful opportunity that comes along, but because it's not green and blue with a white stripe down the middle, you just discount it. And I've never been like that. I've always been opportunistic like you, where I'm like, okay, I did put the intention and I wanted to go this way, but look at this opportunity that just came my way. This is what the universe has given me. Let's go for it, So I think those things are vital. And by meditating, I can listen. It can, help guide me, through all that. And I can get to the self, who the true self in my spirit. And I'll just talk about mindfulness for a second. I think really the best way to talk about mindfulness is to understand that most of the time we're mindless, right? When I get in the car and I'm going with my wife to the mall, but I start driving the car towards the gym because I go to the gym every day, this is because I'm mindlessly doing something, right? And so the idea is to be mindful of the present, this moment, who I am, what's going on around me, what are the messages, right? Is it sunny? Is it, rainy? How do I feel? What am I thinking? It's being present really and being mindful of what I'm doing. It's not meditation, but doing that throughout the day is very helpful, and you don't get caught up in the stress and craziness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that topic of mindfulness too. The one thing that keeps me centered with that is breathing, focusing on my breathing throughout the day.
Yes.
I'm just always breathing in, breathing out. And when I'm doing that, I, again, feel very calm, but the mindfulness is there,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
But it's okay to
fantastic.
be mindless sometimes too. I mean, we need those moments as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't help it. It's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So, what are the key takeaways do you want to wrap up with?
I think so. Yeah, just going back to 3 things that I do to stay focused is number 1, knowing what I want, and not just what I want, but why do I want this one thing? So my big why, right? And I'll actually write this down. Like every morning, I'll write down these 3 things. What is it that I want? How am I going to get it? And what is the next action I have to take in order to move towards this thing? So just 3 things really, and I think you can apply that to just about anything. But again, clarity is the key. Just spending time again, with some meditation, mindfulness, doing some journaling, and thinkification, or just taking some time to do some of that, mindfulness and deep thinking. And again, the reason for that is just to get centered with figure out what it is that you really want, because you may be working, I mean, I think a lot of people are working in a job that they claim that they don't really like. Well, it's like, and then they quit and they get frustrated with that. They quit and they go and do another job they don't really like. And, we've all done that. I think, I hate this job. I'm going to go do something else. And then we're doing something else that we don't like. So for me, I just realized I wanted to stop that pattern by building something that I really wanted. Again, it just came down with, I knew what it was, and then I just had to start doing it. And then I had to keep showing up every day. And like you said, yes, when you're right though, you're like, those opportunities that came by for me, like with publishers and things like that. I was planning for that maybe years before, even though I didn't realize it. Right. But it all came back to that, showing up every day and just putting in an hour
Yes.
or 2 hours, even when I had my full-time job and I was raising my kids and all these things, like, and because people are very, very busy. So one thing I hear a lot is, I don't have the time. It's like, well,
Mm.
I once thought that too. So what I did is I thought, okay, well, I don't have the time, but I'm playing video games for an hour a day. I know I'm watching TV at least an hour a day, still working my full-time job and doing these other things. But what if I gave up the games? What if I reduced my TV time? And so I actually looked at it. It turns out I had 3 hours a day that I could actually, so yes, I had to make a sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
But, did I want to be playing video games, or did I want to be, publishing books? And it just came, when I put those things in front of me, it's like, yeah, I'm giving up the games. And I did. And I love playing Call of Duty. I mean, I was pretty good at it too, but it was either that or the other thing. So
That's fantastic. No, I love it. I love it. And I think, as you clearly were speaking about earlier, you start organizing your life in this way, you start building those routines that you do, and you just keep doing that over and over and over again, and you just keep adding more to your life, and working a little bit more, maybe at a higher level, where you're more focused, like you were talking about, taking these focus blocks to say, I'm going to work on this for 3 hours or 4 hours, and just being 100% focused and just totally going all in and doing it. So I think, as we improve our lives, for somebody who doesn't have 2 hours in the morning that they're taking to go to the gym, take care of their health, meditate, and get themselves centered, and then, end it with a 5-minute cold shower, and to start my day really, and then to go out and do everything else. You took time to get there, right? So everybody just needs to start incorporating these things in your life. If you just, I forget who said it actually, but it's just about 1% improvement every day, right? If you just improve yourself 1% every day in 100 days, you're going to you could see the growth and change. You could see it, That's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And eventually that leads into, putting in 10,000 hours towards something.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's been a great journey.
Yeah. I appreciate you, Scott. I'm going to keep in touch. Have a great day.
Yeah, I will. Well, thanks for having me on the show. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you, bro. And I'll drop all your information in the show notes.
Appreciate it. Okay.